Sakura High was about as exciting as watching paint dry. Most of the time it felt like we were stuck in a time warp, especially in Mr. Tanaka's history class. Don't get me wrong, Mr. Tanaka was a nice guy and all, but his lessons were drier than the Sahara Desert. That's where my friends and I came in. We were the self-proclaimed League of Laughter, dedicated to injecting some much-needed fun into Sakura High. There was me, Kenji, the mastermind behind most of our brilliant ideas, or at least that's what I tell everyone. Then there was Hana, the tech whiz, always coming up with crazy gadgets and gizmos. And finally there was Hiro, our resident artist who could turn anything into a masterpiece, or at least a pretty convincing fake. One boring afternoon during one of Mr. Tanaka's lectures about ancient pottery, inspiration struck. "Guys," I whispered, "I think it's time we liven things up around here." Hana raised an eyebrow, her fingers already twitching, probably itching to hack into the school's PA system. Hiro, as always, started doodling in his notebook, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. Operation Prank Tanaka-sensei was a go. Our first prank was a classic. Mr. Tanaka was obsessed with his old beat-up car. He talked about it more than he talked about history, which was saying something. So naturally, we decided to give his precious car a little makeover. After school, we snuck into the parking lot, armed with 1,000 sticky notes. We covered his car with them from the bumper to the roof. The next morning, Mr. Tanaka walked into the classroom with a bewildered look on his face. "Did anyone," he asked, his voice trembling slightly, "happen to notice anything unusual about my car this morning?" We all burst into laughter. Even Mr. Tanaka couldn't help but crack a smile. But little did we know, this was just the beginning of the great Sakura High prank war. Mr. Tanaka, it turned out, was not one to back down from a challenge. The next day we walked into class to find our desks rearranged into a giant pyramid. It took us a good 10 minutes to untangle ourselves, and by then, Mr. Tanaka was at the front of the classroom trying to hide his laughter. We retaliated by replacing his whiteboard markers with ones filled with invisible ink. His frustrated look when nothing appeared on the board was priceless. But Mr. Tanaka had the last laugh. He showed up the next day wearing a t-shirt Hiro had designed for him, featuring a giant picture of his own face. The pranks escalated, each one more outrageous than the last. We replaced his coffee with green tea, he actually seemed to like that one, and swapped his lecture notes with sheet music. He, in turn, covered our classroom floor with bubble wrap and replaced the school bell with his ringtone, which, embarrassingly, was a catchy J-pop song. It all culminated one sunny afternoon. We were in the middle of a particularly dull lesson on the Meiji Restoration, when suddenly the classroom door swung open, and Mr. Tanaka marched in, armed with a bucket full of water balloons. We knew what was coming. Water balloons flew across the classroom, soaking everything and everyone in sight. By the time the dust settled, we were all drenched, laughing so hard we could barely breathe. As we cleaned up the mess, Mr. Tanaka turned to us, a twinkle in his eye. "You know," he said, "for a bunch of pranksters, you guys aren't so bad." And in that moment, we realized that maybe, just maybe, we'd learned something more than just how to pull off the perfect prank. We had learned that sometimes, a little bit of laughter was all it took to turn a boring history lesson into a memory we'd never forget.